صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن زايد آل نهيان ولي عهد أبوظبي نائب القائد الأعلى للقوات المسلحة، سمو الشيوخ، أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، الضيوف الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. في 2 من ديسمبر من عام 1971 وفي الساعة 12 ظهرا بتوقيت دولة الإمارات بدأت مركبة فضائية تحمل اسم مارس 3 بالهبوط إلى سطح المريخ، وكانت هذه أول مرة يهبط فيها شيء من صنع الإنسان على سطح كوكب آخر، أي أن البشرية وصلت لكوكب المريخ أثناء رفع علم دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة لأول مرة. وبعدها ب43 عاما على قيام الاتحاد أعلنت دولة الإمارات عن عزمها إرسال مهمة لاستكشاف كوكب المريخ تثري بها المعرفة البشرية وتبعث بروح الأمل في منطقة ابن العربية. يشرفني اليوم أن أتولى مهمة إدارة هذا الحوار، والذي هو بعنوان عالمية ناسا ورحلة الإنسان إلى المريخ، في مجلس صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن زايد آل نهيان. الحضور الكرام، ضيفنا اليوم هو رئيس وكالة الفضاء الأمريكية ناسا، رائد الفضاء السابق السيد تشارلز بولدن. التحق تشارلز بولدن بسلاح الجو التابع للبحرية الأمريكية في عام 1970، كما اختير بعدها من قبل وكالة الفضاء للانضمام لبرنامج رواد الفضاء، حيث خاض 4 رحلات فضائية قضى فيها 680 ساعة في الفضاء. ويحدثنا السيد بولدن اليوم من خلال محاضرته عن المرحلة القادمة لوكالة الفضاء الأمريكية ناسا في استكشاف واستيطان الفضاء الخارجي. ونلفت عنايتكم إلى أن المحاضرة ستكون باللغة الإنجليزية، وبإمكانكم استخدام السماعات لمتابعة الترجمة الفورية. وبعد الانتهاء سيتم فتح المجال لطرح الأسئلة التي يمكنكم كتابتها على المنشورات الموجودة أمامكم. اسمحوا لي الآن بالتحدث باللغة الإنجليزية. Your Highnesses, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our guest today leads an organization that is at the very forefront of our species' effort to explore and populate new worlds. He has had a distinguished career both serving in the United States Marine Corps and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, which he leads today. A veteran of 4 space flights, he completed over 680 hours in space. I have the privilege today of introducing Mr. Charles Bolden, the Administrator of NASA, to talk to us about NASA's global reach and the human journey to Mars. Now, without any further ado, please join me in welcoming our guest of honor, Mr. Charles Bolden. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I want to say on behalf of all of our party, what a great pleasure we have had here in your incredible country over the last few days. For me, it is actually a return. This is not my first time in the UAE. It is the first time as the NASA administrator. But a long time ago, as I look around the room, before many of you were born probably, I served in the region as an active duty Marine, and we found ourselves on occasion coming here to have meetings with the GCC leadership at what is now the very powerful Air Force Academy, or Air University. When I was here in 97, 98, I think it had just finished construction, and they were getting ready to get underway. So it is a pleasure for me to come back to be here and see how much things have changed. We've also been privileged to visit with 2 universities while we were here. We actually visited Masdar Institute, and we visited Khalifa University, and I will speak on behalf of our party. We were, in the words that we would use in the United States, blown away. We were very, very impressed with the curricula that were offered, with the vision that was being instilled in the students, and probably most importantly, the enthusiasm of the students themselves. Coming from NASA, where we make the impossible possible, and we believe that we turn science fiction into science fact, it's always good to be around young people who were like those that we met today. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about humanity's future in space, but more particularly about the journey to Mars, one that we are very excited that we now can embark on that journey along with our colleagues, our friends from the UAE. It was my great pleasure yesterday to represent the U.S. government in signing a new framework agreement with the United Arab Emirates to expand our deepen our friendship and our cooperation to achieve greater things together in space, whether it's space exploration, aeronautics, education, or a number of other fields. We also signed an arrangement for future cooperation in Mars exploration. From orbit, you see how interconnected humanity is. This is one of my favorite images, and I will tell you, aboard the International Space Station today, or when I flew aboard the shuttle, you didn't quite get this view of Earth. This is a little bit farther away than we are when we fly human spaceflight missions today. We see large portions of Earth at any time. So if you can just allow yourself to kind of zoom in such that you see maybe the top 3/4 of our globe there, particularly this region of the world, you'll get a feel for what it looks like from the incredible vantage point of space. Students ask me all the time, what does it feel like to go to space? And I tell them there are two sensations you get. One is the feeling of being free to float. Gravity is overcome. We're still living in a gravity environment, but it's competed against by the centrifugal force created by our speed. So we tend to want to fall to Earth, but it won't let us, and so we have the sensation of floating. But perhaps the most dynamic and the most lasting impression you get is just the view of this planet in all its beauty. And as I say to youngsters all the time, it really makes you wonder, if it is really this beautiful from this vantage point, what are we doing wrong down here? And so you come back dedicated to do what I think many of you are trying to do, which is to find ways to cause us all to work much better together in peace and harmony. And so that is one of the big things that NASA is always trying to do. Our strategic vision at NASA is to reach for new heights, to reveal the unknown, so that everything that we do and everything that we know benefits all humankind. So we are not an American space program out for America. We are about making life better for all humanity here on this planet. So whether we're working on the International Space Station, whether we're sending a satellite, as we did last summer, past the planet Pluto. Some people call it don't call it a planet. I do. The planet Pluto. Or whether it's landing on Mars, as we have done several times, or going to orbit Mars, as the UAE is hoping to do here, coming up and not that far off. It is to make life better for humanity, for all of us here. I will tell you, it requires a lot of planning. We have already been here working with the UAE Space Agency for almost a year. My dear friend Dr. Khalid here, the chairman of the space agency, he knows very well, because we've been hard at it just trying to get all of the pieces and parts into place so that we could sign our agreements this morning, and we finally reached that. So I think we're all up to the challenge, but it's going to be very hard. It's going to require a lot of planning, a lot of smart people. There is no shortage of smart people in the UAE Space Agency. I have been incredibly impressed, and I'd like to take many of you back home with me to Washington, D.C. to help us at NASA, so watch out. Above all, we have a shared vision of how we can raise the bar on human potential. Before I talk about going to space, I want to talk a little bit about what NASA does right here on the planet. We have a division that's called the Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate, and our focus is really on flying in our atmosphere. We are trying to go faster, more efficiently. We're trying to give you cleaner airplanes, and we're trying to make it very safe for when you fly. One of the areas in which we'll be able to work under the new framework agreement is in the field of aeronautics, and we're about now trying to help make airplanes that can go faster and faster, exceed the speed of sound, such that travel around the world takes much shorter than it does today, and we're very excited about that. We're committed to transforming aviation by dramatically reducing its environmental impact, maintaining safety, and maintaining the common flow or smooth flow through the crowded skies. NASA's work in earth science, which is another area of our endeavor, is in partnership with many other nations, also is making a difference in people's lives around the world. I want you to take a look at this slide, because it's a time-lapse imagery of our planet viewed from about 1.5 million kilometers away by a satellite called Discovery. We built that for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. It has our weather service But NASA has a particular camera on there that we use for Earth observations, particularly with reference to weather. That camera is called EPIC. And anybody want to guess what that little thing is that flies in between Earth and the camera every once in a while? How about the young man over there? You want to guess? You know what it is, don't you? No? Yell it out if you know. The moon, absolutely. Now, let me tell you something else. For you, there's a young lady over here, so I'll let you all go back and forth, all right? So he told us it was the moon. I'm going to tell you. I won't make you guess. What is unique about this image of the moon from Earth, our moon doesn't rotate like our Earth does. So the moon goes around Earth, and forever and ever and ever since our forefathers lived on this planet, we always looked at the same side of the moon. We can't see what we call the backside of the moon because the satellite is actually 1.5 million kilometers away from Earth. In this image, this is actually every 28 or so days, you're looking at the backside of the moon as it goes by. So this is the first time that we human beings have been able to see the backside of our own moon. Among some 750 international agreements we have with other nations, the majority of them are in the field of science. We're still receiving data back from a New Horizons spacecraft that brought us this absolutely incredible image of the planet Pluto. Until last summer, most very intelligent astronomers and planetary scientists believed that Pluto was this cold, small, tiny rock out on the far distant regions of our solar system. When New Horizons spacecraft began to approach Pluto and got closer and closer and began to do higher and higher resolution images, we found out that, boy, were we wrong. Pluto is an alive planet. It has a slight atmosphere. It has some ice cover. It has huge mountains, some taller than the mountains on Earth. And so we now have to begin what I think will be probably hundreds of years of evaluation of the data. Your Highness, as we go to try to start looking at big data and knowledge capture, we've got our job cut out for us in trying to understand all the data that is coming back already from New Horizons at Pluto. There's another satellite that is on its way right now to another planet in our solar system, the largest, called Jupiter. And this spacecraft is called Juno. For us in the United States, a significant day for us is Independence Day. It is the day of our independence, the 4th of July, and it's timed just such. I'm not sure whether we planned this or whether it just happened this way, but Juno will reach Jupiter on the 4th of July and will be drawn into orbit around the planet Jupiter, where it will stay for a couple of years. What is unique about Juno is that it is the first time that humans have created a satellite that is powered to the outer planets by solar power, not nuclear power. So the large solar sails or solar panels you see on it are what enabled Juno to have gone the distance. It's been flying for 5 years to reach Jupiter. And it's been able to do that because of its giant solar panels. Another one of our satellites that we're going to launch this coming fall, in the fall of 2016, is called OSIRIS-REx. And it's an asteroid sample mission. So as the UAE and NASA prepare to go to Mars together in 2021, OSIRIS-REx will launch next fall to go to an asteroid called Bennu that is in an orbit around our sun. It's going to intercept the asteroid, land on it, and then bring back some samples to Earth. So it will get back here to Earth with those samples about 2023. So by that time, the UAE Space Agency and NASA will have been taking data from Mars' atmosphere for about 2 years. So we'll be there together waiting for OSIRIS-REx to get back to Earth and tell us all that it knows or it has found out about Bennu. This is one of the most extraordinary technological achievements in the field of astronomy and astrophysics in quite some time. It is a satellite that is going to be about 1.5 million kilometers from Earth. We're going to launch it in 2018. It is called the James Webb Space Telescope. It is the successor to Hubble. And the promise of James Webb is it will absolutely dwarf the data and the information and our knowledge of the universe that the Hubble Space Telescope gave us. This is time-lapse photography of, I want you to look at the people. Those are people walking around. They're not really running, but we're running it real fast. That'll give you a feel for how large this telescope really is. What makes it so different is it's actually 16 segments put together in the face of the telescope. They are highly polished, so you could see it as it rose up. You could actually look at the reflection of the rest of the room as the telescope was coming up. It has to have solar panels on the back or that protect it from the heat of the sun, because it operates at an extreme cryogenic temperature that's almost absolute zero. And that's what allows it to look into other galaxies so far away. We are now trying to identify planets that seem to be like our own Earth in other galaxies around other stars. And so James Webb is going to enable us to look into the atmosphere of some of those distant planets that we call exoplanets, because we think that they may very well harbor life, much the same as Earth does here. We have a name for where those planets reside. It's called the Goldilocks zone. Some of you may remember when you were much younger and you heard a tale of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and they came in and there were 3 cups of porridge. One was too hot, one was too cold, one was just right. Well, Earth lives in the just right region from our sun. And so we have a telescope called Kepler that looks into distant galaxies and picks up planets orbiting other suns, and we're looking for the ones that are not too hot, not too cold, but just right, because we think those are the ones that may also be very much like our own Earth. The telescope will be a premier observatory that will just change the way that we look at everything. At NASA, we believe that technology drives exploration, and this is one of the things that was so impressive about every facility that we visited over the last 2 days while we were here in the UAE. Everywhere we went, we saw students and professors and engineers and technicians working on new technologies for the future that are going to allow UAE to be in the forefront of every other nation in this region, if not in the world. But technology drives exploration. The more we invest in game-changing technologies, the better off we're going to be. President Obama is, I give him credit for putting us on this journey to Mars that I talk about, because in 2010, after we had gone through some pretty difficult times for NASA, we were getting ready to phase out of the space shuttle. We had terminated a very important program, or an exciting program called Constellation, because we just couldn't get a handle on it. And the president told us to go back and sort of go to the drawing board and figure out a more affordable, sustainable, effective way to get humans to Mars. And he offered this quote. He said, by the 2030s, NASA is going to put humans on Mars. Not just to go there, but to live and come back. So people ask me a lot of time, you know, are we really planning to leave people there? No, we are not. I'm not sending anyone on a one-way mission. So anybody in the audience who wants to volunteer to go to Mars, if you go with NASA, we'll bring you back. So that's a very important part of ours. Some of the things that have really excited us about Mars and gives us hope that we will find life, or this image is of a huge ice flow, but it's liquid ice. It's actually ice that's full of salt. It's briny ice, and it didn't quite freeze, so you're seeing a flow of frozen water coming down a mountainside on the planet. Why is that important? Scientists here on Earth just went crazy when they saw this, because many of them who look for things that we call extremophiles, species, microbes that can live in extremes of temperature, under the ice in the Arctic or Antarctic, and in the mouth of volcanoes. So when they saw the flowing water with ice, that made them think, okay, when we get to Mars and we can go under and scrape some of the ice off and put it under a microscope, there is a good chance we're going to find living microbes under that ice, just like we do in Antarctica. So that has given us great hope that we're actually gonna find life when we get there. I mentioned before that going to Mars is very difficult, and it takes lots of planning. And this is it's a busy chart, so don't spend a lot of time on it. But it will give you an idea of some of the many tasks, some of the many risks that we have to buy down, some of the many technological challenges that we have to overcome before we're going to be able to put humans safely on Mars and then bring them back to Earth. For example, the biggest part is down at the bottom at 6 o'clock. It says round trip. That's what I meant. We're not leaving you. We're going to bring you back. But in order to bring you back, I need a Mars ascent vehicle. which is just before it, because that's the small launch vehicle, if you will, that's going to lift the astronauts off the surface of Mars, put them in a spacecraft that will then bring them back to Earth. We don't want to have to put a big spacecraft there like we send from Earth today. We want to be able to fuel it with the resources that are on Mars. So we know there's water. We have an experiment that's going up on a Mars 2020 rover in 2020. That experiment is going to actually extract carbon dioxide from the Martian atmosphere and hydrolyze it such that we get gaseous and then liquid oxygen that we can use as propellant in a rocket. We are hoping when we dissociate some of the water, we will get hydrogen. So we put the hydrogen and the oxygen together. We have the fuel for a clean-burning rocket that will then bring an astronaut from the surface of Mars. So that's some of the work that we're really going to do when we get there. This is, some people like it, some people don't. This is the story of the journey to Mars. So if you kind of look at it, you'll see that NASA has identified 3 regions, and you can identify them in terms of time, in 10-year segments from here on out, or we like to call it in terms of challenge. So we have lived in the Earth-reliant zone, that blue area, for some 40, 50 years now. Since humans started going to space, we have operated in and around low Earth orbit. We operate there today on the International Space Station. We've been there for more than 15 years. For some of you who have children who are 16 years or less, they probably have not breathed one breath of their life when there haven't been people living and working on the International Space Station. Because from 1998 until now, we have been constantly living and working on the International Space Station. A good part about it, and a part that I say tells us why we do all this, or an example is, there has always been a Russian, always an American cosmonaut, working hand in hand as brothers, as sisters, but working collaboratively on the space station in the pursuit of making life better here on Earth. It makes no difference what's going on down here on the planet. We manage to be in pursuit of the same type of mission, and so we work very well in space. The second zone in the middle, where you see most of the swirl, we call the proving ground, and we're on the way there. So in the decade of the 20s, we'll launch humans back into orbit around the moon. Hopefully, we will have entrepreneurial interest, academic interest, governments who will want to go and land on the moon and put humans there again, and the U.S. through NASA will help them do that as we continue to work going on to Mars. Our hope is that in the 2030s, we'll make the decision that, okay, now it's time for us to send humans onto Mars, and that will be the culminating event of the journey. I have mentioned a number of times the International Space Station. This is it, probably the greatest technological marvel of our time. We live and work on it every single day. A normal crew is about 6 people. And they come up in increments of 3 each for 3 months at a time. So we're doing that. I mentioned before that a crew either has to take stuff, they have to make it on the way, or they have to get it when they get to Mars. So this is an example of a crew with our astronaut Scott Kelly, who lived on station 1 whole year, actually eating some of the lettuce that was grown on the International Space Station through an experiment called Veggie. So we now grow vegetables, at least some. We grow vegetables. We also grow the flowering plant zinnia. We're about to start growing cherry tomatoes, and then we'll go on and on from there. So we're going to grow stuff as we go. We're looking at microbes to help us produce artificial meat, artificial vegetables, and even with some of the microbes, we have learned how to make concrete. So you won't have to take construction material with you. We have 2 3D printers today on the International Space Station. We have made tools of plastic, and we're gradually moving on to begin to use metallic material to try to make metal materials. This is just to prove that I did go. Sometimes people say, did you really fly in space? Well, this doesn't really show it, but yes, I did. I really flew in space. This is my colleague, Dr. Franklin Chang Diaz, who is a success story in and of himself, born and raised in San Jose, Costa Rica. Decided at the age of 7 he wanted to be an astronaut, and managed to convince his father to send him to the United States at the age of 17, where he was educated and then became not only an astronaut, but today he is one of the world's foremost plasma physicists, building a plasma fusion rocket engine that, when it works, it's going to allow us to go to Mars instead of 8 months today, about 4 months or 2 months. So that'll be game-changing. What we're doing there is biomedical experiment, much as some of the ones that we saw out at Khalifa University today in the Department of Biomedicine. This was our crew for the one-year mission, Scott Kelly and his colleague, Russian cosmonaut Mikhail Kornienko. It's not the longest time that people had lived in space at any one time, but it is the longest time we've ever had an American to stay there for 1 whole year. What was different this time was the Russians, Americans, and all of our international partners collaborated on the tests that would be done, the protocols that would be used, so that the data gathered from their experience is useful to any and everybody who was involved. Scott also happens to be an identical twin. His identical twin brother Mark is also an astronaut, retired astronaut now, but Mark was here on Earth, so we did the first ever genomic study. We called it the twin study, where we now are able to compare DNA, genes, just genomic information from one identical twin who's in space with the other who is down on Earth. So this is some of the work that Scott did over the course of his 1 year in space, from medicine, biomedical research, growing his zinnias, you name it. He did quite a bit. This is Orion. So now let's talk about going to Mars as I close out my comments. To get there, we're going to use a launch vehicle called the Space Launch System, SLS. That's it on the right. It'll be the largest launch vehicle humanity has ever built. In its time, it'll be able to carry 130 metric tons into orbit. The spacecraft on the left is the capsule in which the crew will ride. It's called Orion. We have already flown a highly successful test flight on Orion back in December of 2014 with no crew. We have one flight coming up in October of 2018 when we're going to put Orion on top of the SLS and fly a test flight. And then in 2021, 2023, we'll fly the first crewed mission of Orion and SLS to the moon, around the moon, and begin that period of 10 years that I mentioned I call the proving ground part. While we're doing that, these are some of the Orion tests that are underway today. This is the second Orion vehicle that's now being built for that first flight that I called integrated, actually with the SLS. So here we're testing the engines that are going to go on the Space Launch System. We actually, when trying to be conservative in our spending, we actually are using residual engines from the old space shuttle days. So we take 4 space shuttle main engines, and that becomes the power plant for the Space Launch System. This is an SLS. It's a solid rocket booster that goes on the side, 2 of them. They're a little bit bigger than the ones we used on the space shuttle, but together the main engines and the solid rocket boosters will be what will get us back to the moon and then on to Mars. This is an important part of our journey to Mars, and it's a robotic part. It's called the Asteroid Redirect Mission, where we're going to intercept an asteroid that's coming close to Earth, land on it, take a giant boulder, and then over about 1.5 years, force that boulder to be closer to the moon, where the moon's gravity draws it into orbit, and then we can send astronauts to get out of their spacecraft and work on the surface of the asteroid to develop techniques and tools and technology that someone might use if they want to do things like mining of asteroids or mining of planets in the solar system. Habitation systems that's where we're going to live. Where are we going to live, work, and eat? And so we're looking at all kinds of habitation systems. Frequently, we're working with our international partners. For example, right now, the service module of the Orion crew vehicle is actually done by our European partners, and that's not a habitation module, but it's a power and propulsion module. So once again, it shows how critical international cooperation and collaboration is going to be. This is the heart and soul of the American economy. It's small business, and to build the Space Launch System, there are 800 plus small businesses in the United States in almost every single state that build parts, manufacture parts that go into that particular spacecraft. On the surface of Mars today, the Curiosity rover that has been operating for almost 3 years now, the major components of Curiosity were made by small businesses from the United States. Almost every mechanism, everything that works was built by a small woman-owned business out of Alexandria, Virginia, and San Diego, California. So small business is the heart and soul of American business and industry, and they are the ones that feed the big companies that everybody knows about. Today we're dependent on our Russian colleagues to get our crews to and from space. We go to space on a Russian spacecraft called Soyuz. It carries three of us at a time. That means a crew has to train for about 2 years, most of that time in Russia, to learn how to be fluent in Russian because they operate as a crew member on a Russian spacecraft. And we say there is no reason in the world that the United States should be dependent on any other nation to get our own astronauts to space. So next year we'll fly the first test flights uncrewed on 2 commercial spacecraft carrying astronauts. One is a Boeing CST-100 Starliner on the left. The other on the right is built by SpaceX. And SpaceX has the Crew Dragon. So we hopefully in 2018 will be flying to space on our own commercial crew vehicles. Just as the journey to Mars is taking us outward into space, we don't want to forget another planet, one that I consider to be the most important that I know, and that's our own home here, the planet Earth. So with this view of the whole Earth possible from orbiting NASA science instruments, for the first time in human history, we have consistent, high-quality data about all parts of the world, including the UAE and even more other remote parts of the world. That is why we are so excited about the framework agreement that we signed yesterday, because that now allows us to work hand in glove with our partners in the UAE Space Agency in studying our own planet, getting UAE involved in earth science and remote sensing, in aeronautics, definitely in Mars exploration. So don't know whether the rest of you are excited about it. We are at NASA. So hopefully the rest of you are. This work is carried out in partnership with many nations, but I especially applaud your investment in things like CalifaSat. Earth is our most important planet, and we must take care of it, but in order to do that, we must understand it.
Congratulations to all the women at NASA working as engineers, aviators, research scientists, and astronauts who are broadening the possibilities of space travel and making a future possible for humanity in a galaxy far, far away.
Thank you for inspiring and empowering today's generation of young women and girls to seek careers in the fields of science and technology, and for your invaluable contributions to space exploration. The heroic women of NASA continually inspire girls to enter the space program. So I'm so thankful for engineers like Charlie Blackwell-Thompson, who will be the first woman to oversee a NASA liftoff and launch team.
Being the launch director for this inaugural launch is pretty exciting. We're going to have a vehicle that is over 300 feet tall. At liftoff, over 8 million pounds of thrust. I can't wait to see that. It's going to be amazing. When you couple that with the state-of-the-art spacecraft, Orion, the destinations and the capabilities that these two bring our agency is something amazing. Being in charge of the launch team on EM1 launch day is something that I very much look forward to. I look forward to seeing our team in action. I look forward to looking out the window and gazing at that vehicle as it stands ready to launch.
Learn more about Charlie and heroic women like her at nasa.gov.
That's our story, and as I have told young people throughout this region, they are the future. They are the ones that are going to take us to Mars, because people like me, when 2030 rolls around and the first crew goes to Mars, I'm going to be sitting in my rocking chair, enjoying myself, thinking back on my days here in the UAE and around the region, and thinking about my friend Khalid, Dr. Khalid, and how he managed to get the first UAE satellite to Mars, and that'll all be history by that time. So I am very excited about our collaboration with all of you. We're on a journey to Mars, and we're really, really, really excited about having the UAE as a partner in there. Because now, as we say, you can say you're going to help us turn science fiction into science fact, and you're going to help us make the impossible possible. So thank you very much.
Administrator, thank you for a truly exciting look into the future. We can open the floor for a few questions right now. Maybe we can start with a few of my own. Administrator, one could argue that the main driver for the Apollo missions was security. The United States was at war with the Soviet Union. Once the U.S. realized that the Soviets were not going to the moon, it stopped being a priority. So what is, in your opinion, the driver for the journey to Mars? And will it ever be as potent as the Cold War was for the moon landing?
Yeah. When we went to the moon in the Apollo era, it was a geopolitical imperative, as you mentioned. We had a deep in a Cold War with the Soviet Union then. Today, it's significantly different because there is not the level of competition between nations as it was then. We believe that the key is collaboration among nations. The competition that we have in the U.S. and with our international partners is a competition of ideas. So we are seeking ideas from all of our partners. Our friends in the UAE Space Agency know that we have asked them in the 2 days that we've been here, we need to hear from you. We need to know what it is that we can do to facilitate your success. We won't do it. It is yours to do, but let's talk about ways that you can contribute, that you can actually become involved in the International Space Station, as an example. The other thing about the journey to Mars is that, as I said before, our vision is that everything we do benefits humankind. Everything we've done so far on the road to Mars has developed technologies that have found uses back here on Earth, whether it's purifying dirty water in remote parts of the world so that we decrease the amount of deaths among infants, who most infant mortality around the world is due to waterborne pathogens, just bugs in water. And so our crew on the International Space Station has to have clean drinking water. We can't send it up by rocket all the time, so we now have a water purification system on board. We collect everything from urine to perspiration to you name it, and we recycle it. We're very interested in talking to the UAE because some of your water reclamation methods here may turn out to be things that can be applicable to the journey to Mars. So I think that is the giant difference, is that we have multiple nations working now to affect life here on Earth, whereas during the Apollo era it was the U.S. alone, and that won't happen again.
And in terms of the approach and investment, how would these two be different?
Well, the biggest thing, as I said, is the fact that it is not just one nation. When we went to the moon, there was one nation involved. Now, granted, if there are any few of you who were around when we landed on the moon, you probably remember going in front of a store or going to a neighbor's house if they had one, going somewhere and seeing a television as we saw Neil Armstrong land on the surface of the moon. And for that one brief moment, that was not an American accomplishment. That was an accomplishment of humanity. Every nation in the world can't claim credit for landing on the moon. And that's the way it is now going to Mars. We want to identify it up front as an endeavor of all humanity, as an endeavor of many nations, and that's the way we're starting out, and that's the only way that we believe we're going to accomplish it. One of the reasons that the Mars satellite will be critical, the UAE Mars satellite, is because we have two satellites right now that are observing Mars's atmosphere. One called MAVEN, that is an American satellite looking at the upper atmosphere. Another one nicknamed MOM, that's an Indian satellite that's looking at the lower atmosphere. And as you and I were talking about earlier today, the perfect fit in between is going to be the UAE satellite that's looking at what I call the mesosphere of Mars. So together, we're gonna be able to learn more and more about the Martian atmosphere than we ever knew before.
All right, Administrator, do you think the current astronaut program is sufficient to prepare people to the journey to Mars, or?
We are constantly re-wickering, if you will, or constantly modifying our astronaut selection process and our astronaut training. For example, I would not be selected to be an astronaut today. Today, astronauts have to be able to do three things. They have to speak, they have to be proficient, or at least demonstrate that they have a propensity, or they have the ability to learn foreign languages. I don't do very well. So I probably would struggle to meet that criteria. The other thing that they have to be able to do is demonstrate, and any young person just stellar at this. They have to be able to demonstrate that they can do robotic operations, that they can operate a robotic piece of gear. Your kids do it with, you know, the remote controller at home. That's the kind of stuff that we frequently do on the station and we'll be doing in space. Operating robots that you cannot see, but you're looking at the end effector or the effect that they're having on a TV screen. That's very difficult. And the third thing is you have to demonstrate that you're able to do a spacewalk. I'm not sure how we do that, how we test that, but when I was in the space program, I was a pilot and we were not allowed to get close to a spacesuit. So it's really changing. The complexion of the astronaut office today is changing. In 2013, we selected 8 astronauts out of 6,800 applicants. It's the first time I know ever. We almost matched what you all do here in UAE because half of our selections were women and half were men. In the universities we visited the last 2 days, I'm not sure how you do it, but most of them are at least half women, if not more. So we've got a lot to learn from you as to how you do that.
Minister, one last question before we end. NASA and its international partners have now sent robotic spacecrafts to every planet in our solar system. What is next?
Ooh. What's next after sending one to every planet in the solar system and next sending humans to Mars? So that is the immediate future for us. But we have 2 satellites, one of them called Voyager that was launched in 1977. It was a pair that were launched one right after another. But Voyager 1 has already left our solar system, so that's a first. And it left, I want to say, a year ago. So it is now in intergalactic space or interstellar space. It is no longer in our solar system. New Horizons, the one that I talked about that went past Pluto, we allowed New Horizons to take a turn so that it's actually going to stay in the very outer regions of our solar system in something we call the Kuiper Belt. And it is an area that we think is rich with bodies that are very primordial. They're what would one day be planets had they only come in closer to our sun. So we think that we're gonna take advantage of the ability that New Horizons has to stay in space for many more years, and we're probably going to use it to study some of the far reaches of the solar system that we call the Kuiper Belt. Here on Earth, in aeronautics, His Highness is not going to have to be moving along at Mach 0.8, just under the speed of sound, very much longer. When you travel to New York, you'll be in a supersonic jet, and it will take maybe an hour to get to New York from here. You'll be able to go around the globe in about 6 hours. I'm sure going to feel good about that. I don't know about the rest of you who sit in a seat for 11, 12, 14 hours to travel. And then understanding more about our Earth in the science field, that's the other thing.
Well, it depends on how comfortable the seat is.
Hopefully in a supersonic airplane we will put comfortable seats, but who knows?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
قادت حضارتنا العربية والإسلامية العالم نحو آفاق علمية ومعرفية أسست للمرحلة المتقدمة من التاريخ البشري. وها هي دولة الإمارات تذكر الشباب بمنطقتنا العربية بتاريخهم العريق من خلال مشروع مسبار الأمل، وأنه قد حان الوقت لمساهمتهم من جديد في صنع مستقبل البشرية. وأختم بالشكر الجزير للحضور الكرام على مشاركتهم في طرح الأسئلة، والسيد تشارلز بولدن على محاضرته القيمة والرد على استفساراتكم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.